Okay, so Grandma, what is a story that you would like to pass on to posterity?
Well, I think there are two, but the one I think is one of our Hilton stories that's very dear to me is Mariah Jackson Normington and her husband and family who came across with the Martin Handcart Company, and all the things that they suffered and endured and the hardships. And her husband died, I think, of diphtheria and was buried on a stack of 16 others who died that same day.
Oh, wow.
And then she started out with 8 children, but ended up in Salt Lake with only 2. And she had a baby that died, and then her little child, just older than that, died a couple of weeks later on the trail. And but she had a wonderful experience in England before she left. The Bleak family was in their little branch, and she was in a meeting where there was, tongues and interpretation of tongues. And somebody spoke in tongues and said that Brother Bleak would, and his family, they were a little more well-to-do, but they pooled their resources for the people who did not have so much and decided to come with them when they finally came over, come with the hand carts. But in England, before they left, during this meeting, the person who was talking in tongues said that Brother Bleak and his family would all arrive safely in Salt Lake and would do a great work there. And Mariah, I think she was a person who interpreted the tongues. Anyway, she was in that meeting and heard the interpretation that he would arrive safely. And well, while they were on their journey, he became very, very ill, and his wife left him by the wayside because he could no longer walk and he was not doing well at all. And so they wrapped him in a blanket and left him on the trail. And so the next evening when they camped, Mariah went over to Sister Bleak and said, "Sister Bleak, where is Brother Bleak?" And she said, "Well, he was so ill I had to leave him by the wayside at our last camp." And Mariah says, "But you can't do that. He was promised to come to Utah safely." And so she, and I guess she had a couple of brothers with her, took their, I guess they took everything out of their handcart and went back and found him on the trail and put him in their handcart and pulled him back to camp. And then she helped bring him back to health. And so he did, and all of his family did come back very safely. And that was such a blessing and such a testimony to Mariah and also to the Blake family. And what's so very interesting is that when Earl and I were on our mission as CES missionaries in Boston, there was a Bleak family that lived in Foxborough, which was next to our little town, but that was the stake headquarters of our stake.
Wow.
And we got to know them very well, and their son stayed with us for a few days after he came here, getting ready to go to Utah State.
Really?
But they shared that story with us. And they were his relatives, Brother Bleak's relatives. Isn't that interesting?
That is really interesting.
Our paths would meet and cross that many years later. Okay, and then the other story I want to tell is about the Second World War. I was 11 years old in Albuquerque when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And during that time, my dad, moved to Denver, Colorado to take over the Beneficial Life Insurance Agency. And am I taking too much time?
No.
And so that was during the Second World War. Well, we had gas rationing,
Uh-huh.
so we couldn't, I took driver's ed, but I couldn't practice drive because nobody had any gas.
Yeah.
And we were on rationing, food stamps, for sugar and for lots of other things. And so, let's see, our food was limited, and we raised a victory garden. Everybody was raising victory gardens. And we had some very beautiful patriotic songs. God Bless America was one of them that we sang a lot in school and different places. And what I remember so much, it wasn't about the rationing, it wasn't about the things we couldn't have, it wasn't about the gas, but it was the spirit of the people of the United States, their patriotism and their love for the country. Everybody was so united to help in that war. And that's a memory that I have, and it affects me very deeply when I see people who are so, they don't have the love of America. They're so concerned about their own lives and about their own policies and their own politics, and they even in the wars that we have been in, except for when 9/11, there was about a month of great patriotism here.
Mm-hmm.
But during that whole war, and then most of my growing, and afterwards my growing up years, there was a lot of patriotism in this country and love for their country. And I just think, you know, if the young people today who are so complacent about what they have and what America is, if they could have just lived in those years, they would have felt differently. And that's something I think that the young people need to know, because back then we believed in our Father in heaven. We believed that the Constitution was inspired. You know, most people did.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just the Mormons. But that isn't the way it is today, as you well know. So, okay.